I know you've seen it. A viral video telling you what dying from neurological Sjogrens feels like. Framed like a slow countdown to the end. Numbness turning into paralysis. Nerve pain turning into a death sentence. Comments full of people terrified, sharing their own tingling hands and burning feet, convinced they are watching their own future play out. I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it, not just skim past it to get to the scary part. That video is wrong. Neurological Sjogrens does not kill you. On its own, it is not a terminal diagnosis. It will not put you in a bed with days to live. What can kill you, in a small percentage of cases, is something else entirely, something that shares the same root disease but is a completely different beast. And I am going to tell you exactly what that is, later in this video, because you deserve the truth, not the fear. But first, I want to talk about the thing that is actually happening to you right now. The nerve pain. The numbness. The feeling of your own body turning into a stranger's. Because that is real, it is exhausting, and almost nobody has explained it to you properly. You have been dismissed, told it's anxiety, told it's stress, told to lose weight or sleep more. You have sat in waiting rooms feeling crazy. I see you. This video is for you. Before we go further, I want to be clear about what this video is and isn't. It isn't a diagnosis. It isn't a substitute for your rheumatologist or neurologist. It is an attempt to hand you the map that so many people are never given, so that when you sit across from a doctor, you are not starting from zero, and you are not walking in already convinced you're dying. Before we continue, I built something specifically not for just tracking, and doctor's appointment. It is called Sjogren's Ultimate Symptom Map and Diagnostic Action Plan, and it walks you through exactly which symptoms to track not just for Sjogren but also for MS and I drop symptom map in the comment, and I would send the link for you to access it. Let's clear up the myths first. I'll say a common belief. You decide, true or false. Myth 1. Neurological Sjogrens is fatal. False. The nerve damage caused by Sjogrens, whether it affects the small nerve fibers in your skin, the larger nerves controlling movement, or the autonomic nerves managing your heart rate, digestion, and blood pressure, does not on its own shorten your life. It can be painful. It can be disabling. It can steal function you relied on. But it is not, by itself, terminal. Myth 2. If a video shows dramatic decline and death from a Sjogren's-related nervous system condition, it must be describing typical neurological Sjogrens. False. What actually causes death in a small subset of Sjogren's patients is lymphoma, a cancer of the immune system, and we will get to exactly how that connects in a moment. Conflating the two is not just inaccurate, it is dangerous, because it either terrifies people who do not need to be terrified, or worse, distracts them from the actual warning signs they should be watching for. Myth 3. Neurological symptoms in Sjogren's are rare. False. Research shows nervous system involvement affects a wide range of people with Sjogren's, with peripheral nerve involvement alone reported anywhere from roughly 1 in 10 to well over half of patients depending on how carefully doctors look for it. It is common. It is underdiagnosed. And in a striking number of cases, the nerve symptoms show up before the dry eyes and dry mouth that doctors usually associate with Sjogren's, which is exactly why so many people spend years being misdiagnosed. Myth 4. There is nothing you can do about it. False. This is the myth that matters most, and we will spend real time on it later in this video. Myth 5, and this one rarely gets said out loud. If your nerve conduction study comes back normal, your nerves must be fine. False. Standard nerve conduction studies are built to detect damage in large, well-insulated nerve fibers. They were never designed to catch damage in the thin, uninsulated fibers that Sjogren's most often attacks. A normal test result does not mean a normal nervous system. It often just means the wrong test was run. Myth 6. If dry eyes and dry mouth haven't shown up yet, it can't be Sjogren's. False, and this is one of the most common reasons people get sent home without answers. In a substantial share of cases, the nervous system symptoms arrive years before the glandular symptoms doctors are trained to look for first. Waiting for dryness to appear before considering Sjogren's can mean waiting years longer than necessary for a name for what's happening. What is actually happening inside your body? Sjogren's syndrome is an autoimmune disease. Your immune system, built to protect you, mistakes your own tissue for a threat. Most people know it as the disease that dries out your eyes and mouth, because the immune system's favorite target is your exocrine glands, the ones that produce moisture. But Sjogren's does not stop at glands. In a significant number of people, that same misdirected immune attack turns on the nervous system. There are a few different ways this happens, and the pattern determines what you feel. Small fiber neuropathy happens when the immune system damages the thinnest nerve fibers in your body, the ones just under your skin responsible for pain, temperature, and the automatic regulation of organs you never consciously think about. This is one of the most distinctly Sjogren's-associated forms of nerve damage. It produces burning, stinging, electric shock sensations, often starting in the feet and hands, sometimes spreading. Standard nerve conduction tests, the ones neurologists usually run, often come back completely normal, because those tests are built to catch large fiber damage. This is why so many people with small fiber neuropathy are told for years that nothing is wrong. Confirming it usually requires a different kind of test entirely, most often a small skin punch biopsy that counts the density of nerve fibers, or specialized autonomic testing, neither of which gets ordered unless someone specifically thinks to ask for it. Dorsal root ganglionopathy is a rarer, more specific pattern where the immune system attacks the sensory nerve cell bodies themselves, clusters of neurons that sit just outside the spinal cord. It produces a strange, patchy loss of sensation and coordination that does not follow the tidy stocking and glove pattern doctors expect from typical neuropathy. People with this pattern often describe clumsiness, a sense that their limbs aren't reporting back correctly, or trouble knowing where their feet are in space without looking at them. Because it breaks the pattern doctors are trained to look for, it leads to some of the longest diagnostic delays of any Sjogren's-related nerve condition. Autonomic neuropathy affects the nerves controlling your heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, sweating, and bladder function. This is the one nobody warns you about. It shows up as dizziness when you stand, a racing heart for no clear reason, bloating, constipation, or the sense that your body's internal thermostat has stopped working properly. Some people notice they no longer sweat normally in the heat, or sweat unpredictably in the cold. Others notice their heart rate spikes with minor exertion, like climbing a single flight of stairs, in a way it never used to. Cranial neuropathies are less commonly discussed but do occur, most often affecting the trigeminal nerve, which handles sensation in the face. This can produce facial numbness or pain that gets mistaken for dental problems, sinus issues, or migraine, sending people down entirely the wrong diagnostic road for months at a time. And in a smaller number of cases, the disease reaches the central nervous system itself, the brain and spinal cord, producing symptoms that can look like migraine, cognitive fog, or in rare instances mimic conditions like multiple sclerosis. This is less common than peripheral involvement, but it is real, and it is part of why neurological Sjogren's can be such a confusing, sprawling diagnosis to pin down. Some people describe word-finding difficulty, trouble concentrating, or a mental fog that comes and goes independent of how tired they feel, which is its own frustrating thing to try to explain to people who can't see it. None of this is in your head. The reason it took so long to name is that neurological symptoms frequently arrive before the classic dry eyes and dry mouth, sometimes by years, which means you were never looking for Sjogren's, and neither was your doctor. Add to that the fact that Sjogren's antibody tests, the ones your doctor may have already run, come back negative in a meaningful portion of people who still have the disease. Seronegative Sjogren's is real, and it is one of the most underdiscussed reasons people get told their labs are clean while their body continues telling them otherwise. A negative antibody panel is a data point, not a verdict. What living with it actually feels like. You wake up and your feet feel like they are on fire, or wrapped in something numb and foreign, or both at the same time, in patches that do not make sense. Some mornings it is your hands. Some mornings it travels. You learn to test the shower water with your elbow instead of your foot, because your foot might lie to you about the temperature. You stand up too fast and the room tilts. Your heart pounds for no reason you can name. You have learned to sit on the edge of the bed for a few seconds before standing, a small ritual nobody taught you, one you figured out because your body kept betraying you otherwise. You have been to more than one doctor. You have been told it's probably anxiety. You have been told to exercise more. You have had blood work come back normal more than once, because the standard panels do not always catch this, and you have sat in your car afterward wondering if you are imagining the entire thing. On average, people with Sjogren's-related nerve damage spend years moving between specialists before anyone connects the dots, and in a large share of cases, the nerve symptoms actually showed up before anyone even suspected Sjogren's was the underlying cause. You were not being dramatic. You were describing something real to people who did not have the right lens to see it. The fatigue is not ordinary tiredness. It is a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep does not fully repair, made worse by a nervous system working overtime just to manage sensations that should not be happening at all. Some days it feels like wading through water just to answer an email. Other days you feel almost normal, and that inconsistency is its own kind of exhausting, because it invites the people around you to wonder whether you were ever really struggling in the first place. There's also the social cost that rarely gets talked about. Explaining an invisible illness to co-workers who see you standing and walking and assume that means you're fine. Canceling plans and watching people's patience thin. Learning which friends will still believe you the fifth time you say you're in pain, and which ones stopped believing you after the second. That toll is real, even though it doesn't show up on any lab report. This is a chronic condition. It can be disabling. It can reshape your daily life, your work, your relationships, the things you used to do without thinking. That is a real and heavy thing to carry, and it deserves to be taken seriously without being exaggerated into something it is not. Here is the part almost nobody tells you clearly. The actual risk. Sjogren's syndrome carries an increased risk of a specific complication, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a cancer that begins in the immune system's own B cells, the very cells that are already overactive and misbehaving in Sjogren's. This is not a scare tactic. It is a documented, well-studied association. People with Sjogren's face a meaningfully higher risk of developing lymphoma compared to the general population, with research estimating a lifetime risk in roughly the mid-single digits up to around 10% depending on the population studied, compared to a fraction of a percent in people without the disease. Certain features raise that risk further. Persistently swollen salivary glands. Enlarged lymph nodes that do not go away. Purple or reddish spots on the skin called purpura. Numbness or tingling from peripheral neuropathy, the same nerve symptoms we just spent this whole video on, which research has flagged as one of several markers associated with elevated lymphoma risk. Abnormal proteins in the blood. Low complement levels on lab work. In people who accumulate several of these risk factors together, some studies have found the probability of eventually developing lymphoma climbing dramatically, in the highest risk groups reported as high as around 40%. This is the piece of the puzzle the viral video got wrong by collapsing it into dying from the nerve disease. It is not the nerve disease that kills. It is this downstream cancer risk, present in a minority of people, that turns Sjogren's from a chronic, manageable autoimmune condition into something with real mortality stakes for those who develop it. Why does this connection exist at all? Sjogren's is, at its core, a disease of B-cell overactivity. The same immune cells that are producing the antibodies attacking your glands and nerves are being chronically stimulated, year after year, in swollen salivary glands and lymphoid tissue. Chronic stimulation of any cell population raises the odds that, somewhere along the way, one of those cells accumulates the wrong mutation and starts dividing when it shouldn't. That is the biological thread connecting a dry eye, tingling hands disease to a cancer risk, and it is also exactly why doctors monitor glands and lymph nodes so closely in Sjogren's patients rather than treating it as an afterthought. And here is the hope inside that fear. Lymphoma associated with Sjogren's, especially the most common subtype called malt lymphoma, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue lymphoma, is frequently slow-growing and, when caught early through regular monitoring, is often highly treatable. This is not a hidden, unstoppable threat. It is a known risk with a known monitoring pathway. Regular check-ins on your lymph nodes, your salivary glands, and specific blood markers give your medical team a real chance to catch it early, when outcomes are best. What you can actually do, starting now. If you have neurological symptoms and a Sjogren's diagnosis, or you suspect one, ask your rheumatologist directly about your personal lymphoma risk profile. Ask whether your blood work has ever included complement levels, cryoglobulins, and a full blood count. Ask them to physically check your salivary glands and lymph nodes at every visit, not just once. Report new, persistent swelling anywhere, in your neck, armpits, or groin, immediately, not at your next scheduled appointment. Do not let anyone tell you your nerve pain is just anxiety without a proper neurological workup, including small fiber testing if standard nerve conduction studies come back normal. You are allowed to ask for a second opinion. Ask specifically about a skin punch biopsy if burning or numbness has been dismissed after a normal nerve conduction study. This one test, small and often overlooked, is frequently the missing piece that finally puts a name to years of unexplained symptoms. If dizziness on standing, a racing heart, or digestive changes have been part of your picture, ask about autonomic testing. This branch of the nervous system gets the least attention of all, partly because its symptoms are so easily mistaken for anxiety, dehydration, or simply being out of shape. Keep a written or app-based symptom log. Note where the sensations are, how they change with heat, cold, activity, or stress, and whether anything makes them better or worse. Patterns you notice yourself are often the exact detail that helps a specialist connect symptoms to a diagnosis faster. Build a team, not just a single doctor. Neurological Sjogrens often benefits from a rheumatologist managing the underlying disease, a neurologist addressing the specific nerve involvement, and sometimes a pain specialist for symptom management. No single specialty owns this condition, which is part of why it slips through the cracks so often. Track your symptoms. Patterns matter, and patterns are what finally get people believed. None of this requires you to live in fear. It requires you to be informed, seen, and proactive, which is a very different feeling than the dread that video was selling you. Questions people ask most. Does treating the underlying Sjogrens help the nerve symptoms? In many cases, yes, at least partially. Immunosuppressive or immunomodulating treatment aimed at the disease itself can reduce inflammation driving nerve damage, though results vary person to person, and some nerve damage, once it has occurred, may not fully reverse even when the underlying disease is well controlled. This is exactly the kind of question worth asking your specialist directly, since the right approach depends heavily on which nerve pattern you have and how far it has progressed. Is small fiber neuropathy permanent? Not necessarily. In some people it improves with treatment of the underlying autoimmune activity. In others it becomes a long-term feature to be managed rather than cured. This is another reason early diagnosis matters so much, because catching it sooner generally means more options are still on the table. Can lifestyle changes make a real difference? They can help manage symptoms and overall well-being alongside medical treatment, though they are not a substitute for proper diagnosis and specialist-guided care. This is a conversation to have with your own medical team, since the right approach depends on your specific pattern of nerve involvement and overall health. Should I be tested for lymphoma risk even if I feel fine? If you have Sjogrens, particularly with any of the risk features mentioned earlier, persistent gland swelling, stubborn lymph nodes, purpura, low complement, abnormal blood proteins, this is worth a direct conversation with your rheumatologist regardless of how you currently feel. Monitoring exists precisely because this risk can be silent until it isn't. What to bring to your next appointment? A lot of people leave appointments feeling like they forgot to say the one thing that mattered. So here is a short list you can genuinely bring with you, written down, so the visit doesn't depend on you remembering everything under fluorescent lights with 15 minutes on the clock. Write down when the symptoms started, and whether anything happened around that time, an infection, a stressful period, a new medication. This timeline is often more useful to a specialist than you'd expect. Write down exactly where the sensations are. Not just my feet, but which part of the feet, whether it's symmetrical, whether it moves, whether it's worse at a particular time of day. Bring a list of every test you've already had, even ones that came back normal. A normal nerve conduction study is a meaningful piece of information, not a dead end, because it tells your doctor to look at small fiber testing next instead of repeating the same test again. Ask, in plain words, given my symptoms, do you think I should be checked for small fiber neuropathy or autonomic dysfunction, and what would that testing involve? Specific questions tend to get specific answers, where vague descriptions of feeling unwell sometimes get vague reassurance in return. If you've already been diagnosed with Sjogrens, ask directly, what is my personal risk profile for lymphoma, and what should we be monitoring? Not every rheumatologist raises this unprompted, not out of negligence, but because appointments are short and there is a lot of ground to cover. It is a completely reasonable thing to ask about directly. On the emotional weight of an invisible illness. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from a condition other people cannot see. Nobody looks at you differently on a good day, which sounds like it should be a relief, but it also means nobody adjusts their expectations on a bad one. You can look completely fine while your feet are on fire, while your heart is racing for no reason, while the fatigue is pulling you toward the floor. That mismatch between how you look and how you feel is exhausting in a way that's hard to put into words to someone who hasn't lived it. If you are the one living with this, it is worth naming that grief plainly. Grief for the version of your life before this started. Grief for plans that got smaller. Grief for the friendships that quietly thinned when you couldn't keep up the way you used to. That grief is a reasonable response to a real loss, not a sign that you are failing to cope well enough. Support groups, whether in person or online, made up of people who have actually lived through Sjogren's-related nerve symptoms, tend to help in a way that well-meaning friends and family, however kind, often cannot, simply because those groups already speak the language of what you're describing. And if you are the friend, partner, or family member of someone going through this, one of the most useful things you can do is simply believe them the first time, before the diagnosis has a name, before the tests confirm it, before anyone else does. That belief, offered early and without conditions, is worth more than most people realize. The numbers, plainly. Sjogren's syndrome affects roughly 1 in 100 to 1 in 300 people, overwhelmingly women. Neurological involvement touches a meaningful share of that population, with peripheral nerve symptoms reported in a wide range across studies, reflecting how often it is missed rather than how rare it actually is. The lymphoma risk that follows Sjogren's is real, is elevated compared to the general population, and is also, for most people, something that never happens. Most people with Sjogren's, including those with neurological involvement, live full lives, manage their symptoms, and never develop lymphoma at all. That is the truth. Not as clean as a viral countdown to death, but a lot more honest, and honestly, more useful to you. You are not imagining your symptoms. You are not being dramatic. And you are not living inside a death sentence disguised as a nerve disease. You are living with a real, chronic, immune-driven condition that deserves proper monitoring, real treatment, and people around you who believe you the first time you describe it. If this gave you language for something you have been struggling to explain, or gave you the confidence to ask your doctor a sharper question at your next appointment, like and subscribe. Share it with someone who has been told for years that nothing is wrong with them. The most dangerous outcome in this disease is not the diagnosis. It's the years spent unheard before it. One final thing, as this channel always says at the end of every video. Dr. Manu Jones is an AI-assisted health educator. Every claim in this video is sourced from published, peer-reviewed research on Sjogren's syndrome, including studies on peripheral and central nervous system involvement in primary Sjogren's disease and population-based research on lymphoma risk and its associated clinical predictors in Sjogren's patients. This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace medical advice. If you have concerns about your health, please speak with a qualified rheumatologist or neurologist.